Are you feeling good? Everybody's nodding. I hope you feel sick by the end of this talk. Because you are. That's what we're going to talk about. I am too. We are sick. So sick. I'm a software tester. Many years ago, I started a professional career into software testing. Had my first job in a huge organization. I've never worked in such a big organization before, and I was a little bit scared, but I sold myself well when I got in there. And I think I left an impression that maybe I had some good intuitions about software. So on Friday, I started on Monday, right? And I worked it for a whole week, and it was good. I did my jobs, everything was fine, I think. My manager, my test manager, came over to me, and she was a kind woman. And of course, test managers must be kind, so she was too. And she asked me, how had things been going? Have they been going good? Yeah, I tested this, tested that, I found a bug, did this, and reported, blah, blah, blah. And then she looked me in my eyes, and she said to me, sorry, she looked me in my eyes and said, what is your gut feeling about the system, Anders? At that point, I felt I had a ball of stainless steel inside my stomach. I felt I had no stomach at all. I have no guts. But her question stuck with me ever since. It started my career, and it has stuck with me ever since, because having a gut feeling about a system is not easy. It depends on a lot of things we do, but it's still important. So how do we get it? What is it inside us that can give us a gut feeling? Which algorithm, which method, which book should I read to understand and get this gut feeling? There's no way to be sure that you can get a gut feeling. It just happens. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. It's the human capacity. 3 years ago, I was at a conference, a little bit bigger than this, but just as good. And I talked about philosophy. And then after the talk, a woman came over to me, as I was here having lunch, and we had lunch together, just accidentally. She happened to have been in my talk, and she recommended that I should read Konstantin Neuker. He's a local. He's from here, just a bit south of here. He used to live. Neuker was influenced by Immanuel Kant, and I was talking about Immanuel Kant, so he was very interesting. I've been reading him ever since. It's still working through. I'm not done, so I'm just presenting what I've kind of taken away from him. There's a lot to take away. But I feel that much that what he has to say is that he urges us to become something. The English translation of what, it is probably much better in Romanian, by the way, remember that. So the English translation says to become within being. What does that mean? Okay, I'll try to explain what becoming within being means. How can you be yourself as yourself? How can you become yourself as yourself? That's kind of questions you should ask yourself in order to understand what it means, and read him, of course. But he had some strong opinions, which gave him a few problems during the Ceausescu regime, obviously. He ended up in prison. He was then released and then left in the mountains, not doing too much bad. He only accepted people that could speak Greek to work with him, so probably so that he could be somewhat protected. His books have no signs of anything that goes against the regime, unless you start reading what he's really saying. Because he rejected the idea of the individual as a statistical entity, which is very fundamental in every totalitarian regime. On the other hand, he actually says the individual has a connection to the general. What is the general? Ooh, that's a big question. I'll see if we can get to that, what the general is, in just a moment. But he says that the most general is also the most individual thing. And maybe that's where we can see that there is a gut feeling, that we can have a general point of perspective, a holistic perspective as testers. Sometimes it's not easy, it's very difficult. Getting a holistic perspective, we try and try and try, and we fail, and we feel we fail, we never succeed. But still, having a holistic perspective is probably what's required to have a gut feeling, at the same time as digging into the details. Great. I used to play with Legos when I was a young boy. I did it a lot. I loved creating things just for myself. It was wonderful. I've done that ever since, not just with Legos. Now I'm playing with other things. I have an old car I'm restoring. I'm just doing it for myself. There's no purpose. There's no higher purpose of doing it. But it's important to me. It feels good. It gives me, maybe it connects me to some gut feeling. I don't know. Something happens. I also played with programming when I was a teenager. I wrote an assembler in BASIC, a very simple BASIC. It was a huge task. Nobody used it but me. But it was just fun. And I did it, and I loved it, and I tested it, and oh my God, I found a lot of bugs, and I learned a lot about all the mistakes I could make as a programmer, and all the good stuff I could do as a tester. I still kind of remember some of the things, the feelings that I had back then when things started doing odd things that I didn't intend. It was rewarding. My useful mind, because working like that requires a useful mind, and I feel I still have it. Even though I'm 53. It's something I can enable when I want. It's not something that's there all the time as it used to be when I was a child. But it still likes to be playful at work, even, with objects that have no higher meaning, apparently, than what's in them for me. And that's good, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's good. Okay. I suffer from catalysis. I do not want to explain the word. It's something Konstantin Neuke invented, deliberately like a nonsense word, but he does explain it in his book. I suffer from catalysis when I do this. I'm sick. I'm a sick person, just playing with things without purpose. You like it? Yes, I like it, but we're sick. We do it. But we are sick. Neuke is a hard judge on us, I tell you, right? It's not fun to read him. It's not like, ooh, I like this, it's so beautiful. No, oh my God, I don't like this. I hate it, until he admits that he's sick too. But, okay, then we're true, the author and me, but still. So, I have to tell you a very little bit about Immanuel Kant. And Neuke was inspired by Kant. He didn't agree with him. Totally, he criticizes him. That's part of philosophy, criticize him, right? And we are in a philosophy session, so I'm going to criticize too. I'm even criticizing myself as a sick person, and I'll be criticizing you as a sick person too. And some other people who are not in the room, they'll be criticized. Kant was an interesting person in many ways. He was extremely introverted. He spent his whole life living in Königsberg, which is now Kaliningrad. At one point, he was fascinated with Isaac Newton and science. But then he read a Scottish philosopher, Hume, who said that, yes, we can show all the laws of inertia and whatever, but we cannot know for sure that the sun will rise tomorrow. And then Kant's head blew up, and he spent 10 years looking into the skies, saying, but they are there, the stars. The sun is rising. How can I understand this? And then he wrote his first critique of pure reason. It's a huge book. It's fascinating, because it reveals kind of the murder on the first page, and then the rest is just explaining what really happens. Here's what he says. He has a model of what we do. What he murders, Immanuel Kant, is the idea that this is a chair. You are Isabella. That's what he murders. He doesn't say it's completely wrong. He just murders the idea that it's just so, that it's so simple. It's much more complicated. He says, and this is modern cognitive science too, so there are researchers working on this in psychology and lots of other stuff, brain researchers, the coolest people around, right? They're working on this. And what he realized already then, and he wasn't really the first one to realize that, but he made it more formal and made a philosophy out of it, was that, yes, what's a chair to me is something inside my intuition created as a fantasy from my senses, and my senses do a lot of filtering and actually only picks up very little information and then uses that to generate an image of what I can recognize as a chair. And due to the fact that I've seen many chairs before, and my parents at some point probably taught me how to use a chair, or maybe I found out myself what you should do with a chair and what you shouldn't do. Maybe I looked at someone else and I had an imagination and fantasy inside my head saying something. Things started making sense inside my brain. And the sense-making, Kant says, and this is the fascinating thing, the neurologists, they haven't come to this point yet, and they will never, because this is only philosophy and can only be shown through philosophy, is that there are exactly 4 categories of thought. Actually, there are 12, but each of the 4 have 3 subcategories of thought that we can think as humans, in any language, in any actions. And the 4 are what's countable, what has quality, what has relation, and what has existence modality. That's the words Kant use. Do they make sense to you? Probably not. This is strange that he says there's only 4 and then 3 subcategories. It's very strange. It's like, going to the periodic system and see, this is what everything is made up of. And then going over to your own mind and see, every thought in my mind, is that made up of these 3 categories of thoughts? Yes, it is. Okay. Nobody has proven them wrong. Nobody has found the 5th. Actually, if you go looking in a lot of literature and everywhere, these 4 elements always show up in different things. But the point is, and this is where Kant gets very interesting, is that he kind of solves the problem that, yes, I can have the experience that the sun rises tomorrow because I can verbalize it and internalize it and categorize it in my brain using these terms. I can also just have the intuition, and then I can have the thought afterwards, and that's where I can start having experience, interact with things, make observations, make notes, do science. Not just the simple science that Newton did, but even qualitative science and testing, learning. This has a relation to what we do in software. Have you ever been given the job to deliver working software? How many here are working to deliver working software? Yeah. But what is working software? I don't know. Have you ever opened a microprocessor and looked into it to see if you could see the electrons working? No, I haven't, because it's a waste of time. You won't see it. Then they're not visible. You can't see the software working. Unlike a car engine, I mean, you can at least take the top off and look down and you see the pistons and then put it back on and see it working still, so you can actually see what's working there, but you can't do that with a computer. It's not like that. You can't see the motion. It's not there. You could make out a car engine out of glass and you could see what's going on inside. So even though we're looking at logs or we're looking at screens or we're putting the servers into a rack, we're not seeing the working software. The working software is an intuition into our minds, and the only way we can connect to the intuition is by testing. Yeah, that's good. There will always be testing, always, because nobody can see the working software. So there's no way just to open the code, read the code, and find the bugs. It doesn't work like that. Maybe it did. My father was working with IT back in the 1970s. He used to come home with big piles of paper and read through it and then go out to the customer and fix the bugs he found on the paper, just reading the paper. He found boundary check problems, stuff like that. just by reading the code. We can still do that, except it'll be a waste of time. It'll take too much time, and the boundary check problems have been solved by compilers and unit tests and other stuff. I used to work with a test manager. It was on a big project. And he said these things. He was really obsessed with this. He was so passionate. It was like something was driving him. He was on steroids. I think he had some experiences that he wanted to kind of share or just implement. And he did risk-based testing. Oh, he did risk-based testing. And he found out that he made tables like these. Have you ever seen such a table? Yeah. All the requirements. Let's take all the requirements, put them into an Excel sheet, and score them. What's the probability of failure? What is the consequence? Let's put numbers of these. It's ordinals. Let's add them together, multiply them by factors, do square root, mathematics. Just do it, he said. I said, oh my God, this is not going to work. It's just a number, and you can't add those kind of numbers together. It's a number that someone assigns to something because it's their feeling. I'm not even sure it's a gut feeling. How do they know the probability of failure in that requirement? That's a deep analysis in order to know it. No problem, just do it. You have to do it. And he had management backing, so I have no way out of it. We did it. But we worked out his system. The thing is that he wanted to calculate how many test cases we should write, right? But we backtracked his system. So we said, how many test cases do we have? And then we assigned the numbers based on that. Don't tell anyone. But we knew what we were doing. We had the right test cases. We had good test cases. We had no problems going in production. We only had problems with him. Quality assurance like this is sick. I'm not saying quality assurance is sick as such, but as this is sick. And quality assurance as it's implemented out there is sick. Noika has a word for it. What Noika says is that this test manager is sick because he doesn't understand that the events that happened, where maybe this method worked at some point, is gone. What happened in the last project is no longer. It's empty. It's not existing. What's up to us is to understand it and interpret it and work with it and see what we can do with it. But that's another thing. This guy forgot about that. He said, hey, here was the event. It worked like this. I wrote it down. Let's do it again. The sickness is called horatitis. Horatitis. Sounds infectious, right? So we have 2 sicknesses now out of 6. 6. I'll come to all of them. I'll cover all of them. 2 sicknesses, catalytis and horatitis. And they're interesting because they are both associated with overly accepting something, intuitions, experiences, without being critical about it. Okay, we all do that. Look at something, it looks like a chair, and you sit down on it, and it's not a chair or whatever. Look at the train, you're going home, and you take the wrong train because you thought it was the right train. Yep. So overly accepting what you think in your mind, it happens all the time. You've probably all seen a spider, which wasn't there when you looked. We do that all the time as humans. And then there are 2 different types of sicknesses here associated, that Noika identifies associated. And the one is associated with the part of just taking your attention to the immediate, what things immediately seem to you, and just accepting that as is. Like me playing with a Lego. Hey, here's a chair. obviously a chair. No, it's a plaything. So I'm playing to learn. Yes, this is the 53-year-old parent looking back at the 5-year-old Anders, trying to see, yeah, that was what he was doing. That's the meaning. You weren't sick, you were just trying to learn. And the other thing, which is relating to how we relate to causality, to the fact that things happen and then something else happens. And then we make connections as humans. We always do that. We see a football, we hit it, and we know it will always end up down there. David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, that's what Newton tells us. The Scottish philosopher said, yes, it happens, but we can't be certain that it will always happen. And then Kant comes in and says, yeah, but it's our experience that tells us it. And Neuke says, if we just accept our experiences like that, then we risk suffering from horridities. Let's go to the next sickness. Have you seen this quote before? We had it on the screen a little earlier today. Testing shows the presence of bug, not its absence. Ooh. Is that a sick thought? It's the truth. It's the truth. It's a skeptical, mathematical truth. But Neuke is hard here. He says, yes, this is a truth, but it's a mathematical truth. Is it a practical truth? Is it always like that? Have you ever seen a place in which we couldn't make out something out of the non-finding of a bug? And yes, of course. So if you only look at this was said 53 years ago. It was said, I think, a few months after I was born, so I feel I really have a relation to this. But if you only say this, and this is the only thing you say as a tester, or as a person, but here as a tester you will be suffering from ahorrhea. Ahorrhea. Strange word. Sounds unpleasant, right? It is. These are the things with the professors. They often suffer from strange diseases, right? They, where's reality? Oh, they're inside their own mind. Dijkstra, wonderful, innovative, but bit distant to the real world. Yeah. Ahorrhea. So we have a third one now. Ahorrhea, it sits down here. And now we have a second category. So now I said overly accepting. We can also overly reject things all the time. So reject everything that could be possible as not true. So I'd like to picture yourself on a stool, standing on a stool, watching some event going on. It doesn't matter which event it is. Find one that is meaningful for you. Looking at this event, jotting down information about what's going on, and then going home to tell the stories about the event. As I said, the event was gone. It happened. It is no longer. What is remaining is, of course, our notes, our memories, our intuitions, and our ability, general ability, to say something about it, to tell a story. This is where I feel that software testing is not hard. It's actually getting beautiful, but it's also getting complicated. Because what stories should I tell? What stories should I leave out? What's important, what's not important about what happened? But this is what we're really trying to get at. Is this more balanced? I think so. So, I'm going to say something about context-driven testing. And since philosophy is rooted in logic only, I know I'm getting a little sick now, and probably making you a little sick or too, anxious. It's rooted in logic. So let's assume there's nothing but logic, and read only the logic of the context-driven testing principles. The value of any practice depends on its context. The logician says, what is context? Give me a definition of context. Context is huge. Will it never end? It probably never ends. So what does it depend on? There are good practices in context. Okay, I like that. But what is context? This is the event which no longer is. So was it good then? Yes, I can tell the story, but can I repeat it? There are no best practices. No. But if there's no best, there's no worst either. If there's no best and no worst, is there anything that we can say then? At least in experience. This is where it gets difficult. People working together, okay, so we're a social context, are the most important part. It is within us. It's not within the universe. Projects unfold over time, so it's also time-bound. Okay, so we're getting there now, limiting it a little bit. Maybe we can take something that worked at one point in time with some people and transfer it to some other people. But context is still not exclusively defined. It's inclusively defined here in the principles. And since we're logicians now, let's take the logic approach. Let's see if we can find a bug. And I think the bug might be here. Do the right thing at the right time to effectively test our products. And I think this is messy. I think these principles are messy. I don't like them anymore. I used to like them. I don't like them anymore. Remember the mathematic test manager who did the risk analysis? He probably read an ISTQB book. ISTQB is sick. But the oppositions, the rebels, the context-driven testers are sick too. Because he suffered from horritis. And we, the context-driven testers, suffers from autodichia. There are only good practices in context, but there are no best practices, so there are no worst either. We don't know anything about what works. We cannot say anything about what works. But we claim to be efficient, of course, because otherwise we'll be out of jobs. You see the problem? It's sick. I'm sick. I'm a context-driven tester. And I used to play with Legos, and I still like playing, even at work. I have a few sicknesses here. I also do risk analysis from time to time because I have to. So these are, let me label these guys. These are the ignorant testers. These are the commercial ISTQB consultants, right? These are the uber-skeptic CDTers who don't believe anything, are skeptical about anything. And this is the godfather of testing, Dijkstra. Oh God, it's sick. It's making me sick, so sick. What is this one doing now on me? Oh, it's just repeating the same. Wonderful. There was a bug in my presentation. Or maybe it was just an illusion. How was your journey in testing? Is it good? Is it fun? I hope it is. Do you feel sick at times? I'm sure you do. We all do. Do you feel sick about yourself at times? I hope not too often. I do. I sometimes look at myself in the mirror and, or read Neuke, whatever, and feel, oh my God. Is it really like that? Did I really do that today? Did I really say this? I'm quoting Dijkstra all the time at the moment, right? It's making me sick, but I have to, because it's true. Some of you probably drive a lot of automation and work with it. Some of you work with manual testing. Some of you do manual testing. There's people who don't like the word manual, the term manual testing, and I understand why, but I actually like it, and I'd like to explain why. It's because the hand, and now it's inside my my sleeve here, but you have to believe me, is connected to my brain, which is in here. You have to believe me too again. Directly, there's a direct connection from hand to brain. So it's an extension of my brain. The hand is actually, it means a lot to me. My hands mean a lot to me. They're my identity. It's my fingerprint, by the way. I use it to unlock my phone and get into Romania and the United States and other things, right? It's part of me. And I like and manual in English, as it means in Romanian, is the word for hand. So I like the idea of manual testing, even though it requires so much skill and thinking and action that I do with my hands. And the actions I do with my hands can just be, do 10 actions on the keyboard, because I think that's a good idea. Or press hard. That's a qualitative thing. Press less hard. Press a long sentence. A short sentence. Ask someone what I should do. What makes sense to you to put in here? That's starting to work with relations. My hands will type it in. Or see what could make sense here. What could be good? What could be really, really, really bad for everyone? What could maybe even kill someone? Or make Denmark a bankrupt country? I'm working for the government, so I'm trying not to. How's my timing? Not too good. Got only 21 slides left. Oh, I did 21 slides, that's good. Why test? Do we test to test the objects as they seem, the chair, the person, the Lego bricks, the output logs? Or do we test for a reason? Do we test the individuals? Do we test for them? Rob Sabarin said, we today seem to be testing for our stakeholders. In a moment I'll propose that maybe we could test for an even higher course. But first, I need to kill someone, or rather demonstrate how sick they are. I reviewed a test strategy about 2 months ago, and I was feeling sick, because it was saying, just as Rob told us this morning it's happening, for every user story, there should be a number of BDD gherkin scenarios, given, when, then, counted by the number, it's getting really silly, this, counted by the probability of defects in that user story and the consequences. So they're doing everything they can, but they're putting it into a process. They're making it a process. So the scientific managers put on into a machine that everybody sitting there has to write these gherkin scenarios, given, when, then, blah, 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 blah. Will it help? Not at all. They cannot say anything about what's good or whether this is going to be ready for production just because they've added all these given, when, then things. I'm not saying that if they add great given, when, then gherkin scenarios to their automation, that it can't help them. But what they were saying in the strategy was, just write them and put it in the process, and we'll be good. No, you won't. DevOps and Agile are burning out due to this way of thinking. It's infected Agile and DevOps with a sickness called Todetis. What we really must remember is that when we make a gherkin scenario, it's just a manifestation of one thing. And manifestations can never, they organize themselves into big processes, and we can organize them into processes and how we work with them. And we can do that in all kinds of ways. But they are not reality. They don't give us, it's not the algorithm for getting the gut feeling. So now we have 5. The algorithms know the requirements, meaning is defined, what's good enough is defined, it's put into a machine. There's no reason to think. That's a sick thought. So again, these are what I call the positivistic agilists. If you've read philosophy, you know what positivism is, otherwise you'll just accept it. It's not important. But it's about positively accepting anything just as it is. This is water, I just accept it. That's a spider. There was a spider, there's no spider. Oh. Is the cultures, is the culture in testing sick? Is it becoming sick? Yeah, let's say it's sicker than ever, but let's make it really sick. Let's make it sick in a good way. Let's see if we can do something different. We can twist our minds. We can say something. You're laughing. I know. I know. Someone help me make the slide, because I don't know Romanian. But I know. It should say bada. So it should say bada. I'll correct that. Thank you. That's a bug. The opposite, my point is, thank you, my point is, fantastic. Yes, you are, it's wonderful. You're probably a sick one. Yes, in the great way, you're hired. Whatever. The point is that, here's a Danish philosopher, by the way, he was also a physicist, Niels Bohr. He said the opposite of one truth can be another truth. That blew a few minds, yes? But that's true, right? The opposite of one truth can be another truth. These sicknesses are not just sicknesses to avoid. They are sources of creativity. They are things that we can use to create new modalities, new ways of working. Okay? So if we allow ourselves, this is what he's actually saying, if we allow ourselves to be sick at work, could be playing, doing those silly risk analysis. I don't know what sense it might make, but let's try and see if we can find something new. Let's write BDD just because we can and think it's great and they tell us to do it. Let's apply some context-driven testing. Let's see if we can find some cool heuristics. Here, no best practices, we just do it, right? That's where the creativity is. That's my point. So is there a sixth one? I promised you a sixth one. Now I just promised you it'll be a great one. Catholic testing. The new great thing. No, the new sixth thing. No, I don't know. My point is that there are general values and ethics that we share as humans. I'm not the first on a stage at a test conference talking about ethics or values. Lots of people do that at the moment. But I'm just saying, we don't have this as a method, the ethics-driven testing. But I think it's a thing. Let's talk about it. The stories that we tell from the events that we see, they are told by the same general terms that we all share, as everyone, all humans. We just happen to use different languages for it. Relations between us, and that's also the relations between the software running in the system and its users and the stakeholders, are built in these terms. We have to take our languages seriously. And here's a thing that Neuka says that we should be aware of, that English is not a good language for philosophy. It's a good language for poetry. And it's a good language, a great language for science. But it's not a good language for philosophy. German is a good language for philosophy because almost every term in German contains two notions of everything, right? It's just the thing they have. But you can do the same in Romanian because you have the ba. That's what Neuke says. I don't know. We have things in Danish too that allows us to and helps us do it. But the English is a little bit difficult in that. So try to use your own language or learn a different language if you are an English native speaker. And then try to generalize and dare to generalize on your gut feeling if you have one. So, it's a sick thought, isn't it? The most general is also the most personal, right? What's general to everyone is also the most personal. The values shared by everyone are also my personal values. It's a little bit strange, a little bit sick, but let's try to think about it. Try to think about it and see if you can find something in there. Philosophize. Let it ruminate. The message I want to convey, in which I got from Neuke, I have to say that, I didn't invent this myself. Maybe I had it as a feeling, is that we should be our authentic selves. Be ready to be sick. Become the sick tester you are. Because if Ben here is sick in one way, and I'm sick in another way, and you're sick in a third way, and you're in a fourth way, and we have you in the sixth way, and you over there in the fifth way, let's work together. Diversity matters. That's it. Questions?
Yes, I think we have 4 more minutes of questions before the break. There's one over there if you want to take that one.
Yes, I'm curious to know, how does Anders deal with a story task in his daily activity as a tester, or does he start testing a new task? Actually, I'm a test manager, so I'm not testing very much, and when I do testing, I primarily do it in order to verify something that's either obvious or very difficult to see. I generally don't use stories. I try to avoid them for just the reason I just explained, but I'm aware that in the company I work, it matters a lot, and it matters to our clients that we work with BDD, and that this is the best practice in BDD to write BDD given then scenarios by every user story. So if the client requires it, if the stakeholder wants me to do that, I'll do it.
Cool. Any questions in the room? There we go. We have one right over there. I see you.
Hi, so thanks very much for this presentation. My question is, how would you unite all of these different points of view, all of these sicknesses you mentioned? What would you think would be like a great way to merge all of this in a team, let's say?
Well, Neuke presents a theory of culture, and I don't know if we can test people when you build teams, you often test them in people in different ways to ensure that you have a great team. That's what HR people do. I think it's probably better to ask them, what are you passionate about, or see if you can find some experience and then try to mix people. I think the important message here is that to try to see if you can get this mathematically oriented person coupled up with one that's more context driven, so they can have a discussion about things, and then maybe be aware, if you're their manager or their leader, be aware that it shouldn't end up in a conflict. So teach them about the value of diversity and listening to each other, because that's where the message is really important. Diversity matters, and that's a question about appreciation of other people and others.
I was wondering if maybe it would help to make sure they all have the same goal, as long as they understand they are working together, they can maybe overlook the fact that they are also different.
Yeah. Neuke was not goal-oriented, so Neuke wouldn't I don't remember which of the illnesses or maladies, as it's called in English, he diagnoses himself with, but he was not goal-oriented. So in context of this, I don't think I'll share any ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
it's important, and I think that's the important thing about the question, that there's real work there, leadership work there to set a goal and help people, given their differences, work together.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. I think that's all the time that we have. So Oh, there's another question on the board.
Yes.
Please.
Do you think Narka was a happy man? Oh, no and yes. I think he accepted himself. I think, as he describes himself, he was unhappy for most of his life. You read him, Adela. But I think he became happy and accepting, even of his fate of having spent a long time in prison. Yeah.
Thank you. A round of applause for our speaker.